Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Brian Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. Hey guys, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Brian Alzate. This is episode 1 of the speaker tape series. I always share how influential speaker tapes were when I first got clean. Sometimes I don't know if I would be here today if it wasn't for some of these speaker tapes. Today we have Sean E. I heard this guy speak, or I heard his speaker tape probably when I had 2 or 3 years clean. I was never able to find his speaker tape. I did save it onto a hard drive, and I had to dig through all my old possessions to try to find it. I finally found it, and the hard drive had his speaker tape broken up into a bunch of different tracks. Shout out to Maria. She was able to link all the tracks together and combine them so that way it actually flows. This guy has an amazing message, and I hope you guys get a lot out of it, because I know I did. Thank you.
My name is Sean. I'm an addict. One of the reasons I started using was because I never felt a part of. I always felt like I was on the outside looking in. I never felt good enough. I always felt like when I wasn't around, people were talking about me. I just felt that the image I had of myself was so low, I just couldn't possibly think that anyone would want to be my friend. So I became a chameleon. And I would jump around from crowd to crowd. But I would only stay around a little while for fear if they got to really know who I was, they would hate me just as I did. And then I came to Narcotics Anonymous. And with a few simple words, my name is Sean and I'm an addict. I can go anywhere in the world and feel a part of.
Yeah! Yeah!
I'd like to start this off with a moment of silence. Narcotics Anonymous, in the group booklet, it says that a moment of silence should be 15 to 20 seconds. Can we have a true moment of silence for the still suffering addict, please? Thank you. Let me share with you the importance of that moment of silence. As my sponsor always shares and his sponsor always shares, 8 years ago they were having a moment of silence for the still suffering addict, and it was me. I was using. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe that when you get as many people who are as self-centered as addicts are to set aside their self-centeredness and pray for a common purpose, it creates a level of energy so powerful that it will pull the addict out of the dope house and into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. I love Narcotics Anonymous. I used to share facetiously when I had about 18 months to 2 years clean that we have the finest people on earth in Narcotics Anonymous, a bunch of junkies and crackheads. But now, today, I truly believe that we have the finest people in the world in Narcotics Anonymous. I truly believe that. And I want to welcome anyone who's new here. If you're new, you're the most important person at this or any meeting in Narcotics Anonymous.
Yes, you are.
And whatever your clean date is right now, it never has to change. Relapse is a reality, but it's not a requirement. I've been clean since my very first meeting in Narcotics Anonymous. My sponsor's been clean since his very first meeting in Narcotics Anonymous. And his sponsor's been clean since his very first meeting in Narcotics Anonymous. You never have to use again. Even if you want to, you never have to use again. I'm so grateful to the program in Narcotics Anonymous. And I think people throw gratitude around a lot. Gratitude isn't a word, right? Gratitude's an action. My gratitude shows in the way I live. And if everyone was as grateful as they said they were to be clean, there would be a waiting list to be the coffee maker at your home group.
Hello.
There would be a waiting list to be the secretary at your home group. You would put your name on a list in the hopes that in 2 or 3 years, you get the opportunity to serve Narcotics Anonymous in any capacity available because you're that grateful for what the program has done for your life.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to God, the terrible, horrible things that I did when I was using and clean sometimes. The horrible, despicable person I was using and clean sometimes. The life that I live now in Narcotics Anonymous is not what I deserve. This is not what I deserve. If I got what I deserved, I would be locked up in some sort of institution, dead, or just living to use and using to live. God gave me his grace when I deserved his justice. And he led me to the program in Narcotics Anonymous, where I found the life-saving message that an addict, any addict, can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. Our message is hope and the promise of freedom. Freedom from active addiction. Freedom from drugs is just the first step in freedom from active addiction. It says in the first step in the basic text that our inability to control our usage of drugs was a symptom of the disease of addiction. In the second step, and it works how why, it says that the longer we stay clean, the more evident it becomes that our addiction goes much deeper than the drugs we use. Much of our problems seem to center in our search for something to make us feel whole. And I'm going to share a lot about that search for something to make me feel whole. Let me tell you guys about how I got here. I don't share much about my using, right? I use, trust me.
We believe you.
See, so much has happened to me since I've been clean, right? So much has been happening since I've been clean that if I dwell on the war stories and about using, then that'll cut in the time that I need to share about the miracles that have happened in my life clean. This is a celebration of recovery. We're not talking about war stories here. We're not talking about how bad it was using. I know how bad it was using. I used. If you use like I use, you know what hopelessness felt like. You know what desperation felt like. You know what it felt like to stick your hand in your mom's purse. I don't need to tell you that. You know that. I'm here to share with you how wonderful my life is as a direct result of practicing the principles of Narcotics Anonymous in my life on a daily basis. But I will share a little bit about what led me to using. My family, when I was a child, they weren't very physically abusive, but they were very verbally and emotionally and spiritually abusive. My home was one of fighting constantly, nonstop. And I remember one time in particular, I was about 5 years old, and my parents were fighting, and they were fighting really, really bad, and things were being said like, I hate you, I wish you would die, I wish I never had these kids with you, I wish you'd all just die, I hate you, just leave. And they were both saying similar things. And imagine the way a 5-year-old boy internalizing his mother saying that she wished he was dead, that she wished that she never had him. And I remember going to my room and crying and praying to God, God, let my family stop fighting. Let them stop fighting. Let them love each other. And they didn't stop. And at that point, I began to experience feelings as though I was not important to God and as though God didn't love me. And when I was 10 years old, I was molested by a young boy down the street, and I liked it, and I went back for more. And that created a level of confusion inside of me that I can't begin to even explain. The confusion that created in my life is still with me today. Because I was always raised with that men have sex with women and women have sex with men and anything else is degenerate, immoral, against my religion. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, if that's the lifestyle you choose, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm sharing about the belief structure that I was raised with as a child. Told me that this was wrong. And so it created this confusion inside of me. And then when I was 11 years old, a similar thing happened with my older brother. And again, I liked it and went back for more. And it created more confusion. And I thought, God surely can't love me now after I've done this. And also when I was 11, there was this little girl down the street, Tiffany. And Tiffany and I were in love. I was in love. I was in love. We spent every waking moment together. I would go over her house after school and we would do homework together every single day. And I thought we were going to get married and have kids and have a house. And although it was never verbalized, I just thought that it was a given. You know, I just thought that she had the same feelings for me that I had for her. One day after school, she said, Sean, don't come over after school today. And I said, okay. The next day, the same thing. The next day, the same thing. The following Monday, she missed school. And as I would always do when she missed school, I took her homework to her house. And when I went in her room, I caught her having sex with another little boy from the neighborhood. And at that point, the feelings of betrayal that I had and the feelings of rage, I never experienced rage like I felt at that moment. I never experienced anger like I felt at that moment. And I pulled out my pocket knife and I stabbed the little boy twice in the neck, and he died. And I ran away from home because I really didn't know what happened. I kind of went into a psychotic state, and I ran away from home. And it was the middle of winter, and they found me like 4 days later in a ditch. I was half dead and half alive. And they took me to a psychiatric institute to evaluate me, and I spent about 3 or 4 weeks there, and then they put me on trial for this young boy's murder. I ended up doing roughly 3 years in a maximum security juvenile penitentiary for violent offenders. At that time, it was the only one of its kind in the country. While I was there, all kinds of horrible, terrible things happened to me. The guards were very brutal. They used to force us to have sex with them and force us to have sex with other inmates, and they would videotape it, and they would humiliate us, and it was just awful. It was just awful. But in that institution, I was introduced to heroin. Anyone who's been in a prison knows that drugs are just as prevalent in the prison as they are on the streets, if not more prevalent. They might even be easier to get. I never had a problem copping when I was in prison. Never once. And I was introduced to heroin, and when I tried it, that was the first time I'd ever felt okay in my own skin. That was the first time I ever felt all right with who I was. It was the only thing that ever took the pain away that I had inside. And so I used that for many years after that. I was 12 when I first tried heroin. And I got out of the facility, and my parents had moved to a small town on the other side of the state because they wanted to get away from the stigma of what had happened. They didn't want the stigma around the family, and I continued to use. And at some point, I started living to use and using to live. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. You see, I never had a problem stopping using. I could always stop. I could always kick for a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, but for some reason, I would always pick back up. Like it talks about in the literature, something in our self-destructive personality cried out for failure. And I would always pick back up, and I remember one time I had been clean for about 3 or 4 months, and I picked back up and I OD'd. And when you use the way I used, you learn to deal with certain things. You learn to deal with overdoses. I mean, it's a common occurrence. And so they came out and they gave me Narcan, and they revived me, and they brought me to, and they went on their way. 3 days later, I OD'd again. Same dope. Same dope. Never even asked myself, could it be the drugs? This time it was more severe. Last thing I remember that night was about 10 p.m. I was living back at my mom's house. Last thing I remember was telling my mom goodnight at 10 p.m. They found me blue on the couch at 8 a.m. They called the ambulance. The ambulance came out. They took me to the hospital. The hospital they took me to was a small hospital. They were ill-equipped to deal with the case of my severity, so they called in the helicopter, and the helicopter took me to the big hospital in the area, U of M. And a couple times along the way, I flatlined, and eventually they got me stabilized, but I was in a coma. And the doctors told my parents that there was such little brain activity that I would probably never walk, never talk, never be the son again. And they told my parents after a little while that, you guys might want to consider going ahead and ending this, because he'll never, the brain activity that he has, with the little brain activity he has, he'll never be himself again. And my dad said, okay, let's do this. He'd had enough of it. Thank God for codependency, man. Thank God for codependency. Because, codependency really paid off this time, because my mom couldn't let her little baby go. She just couldn't let her little baby go.
Pesky mothers.
7 days later, I came to. I used to try to explain how it happened and like philosophize and about how it happened. And then my sponsor finally told me, he said, Sean, how do you explain a miracle? You can't. Quit trying to explain that it happened and just deal with it happened and move on. So they sent in a social worker to talk with me about my various treatment options. Now keep in mind, let me paint you a picture. I got dreadlocks down to about here. I hadn't showered in probably about a month or 2 months. I had an abscess the size of a softball on my groin because that's where I used to shoot. Because the job I had to wear short sleeves, so I couldn't have track marks. So I stuck it in my groin. I had an abscess the size of a softball down there. And they sent in this social worker to talk with me about my various treatment options. Now I'm still thinking about the next one. I can't get my mind off the next one. All that had just happened, all I can think about is the next one. And I knew if I went to inpatient treatment, it would make it that much more difficult, if not impossible, to get the next one. So I convinced this lady, the good manipulator that I am, that I could do with outpatient treatment. So she wrote me the prescription for outpatient treatment and sent me on my way. But before they let me out of the hospital, she gave me a Narcotics Anonymous meeting list. Thank God for H&I. Thank God for H&I and public information. If you do that level of service, you may never hear the impact that it has on people's lives. But you saved my life. I got out of the hospital. I went back to my dad's house. I'm still thinking about the next one. And I tell him, why don't you give me your car key so I can go to one of these meetings? And he said, if you go near my car, I'll shoot you dead. But what I will do is I'll take you to one of those meetings. And so I went to this meeting. They obviously knew I was a newcomer. I mean, I had a friend who used to share before he died that he could have been arrested for felonious greasiness with an attempt to slide. I mean, I was fucked up. They knew I was a newcomer. They insisted that I surrender. So I surrendered, and then at that meeting, someone picked up clean time all the way up. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 18 months, and 3 people celebrated multiples. The first person celebrated 2 years, the second person celebrated 5 years, and the last person celebrated 18 years. And the guy who got up there and celebrated 18 years said, just for today, you never have to use again. I knew at that moment, I knew the war was over. And from that day until this day, I have not used. They talked me into going into a treatment center. So I went into an inpatient treatment center. And again, thank God for H&I, and thank God for the more experienced members. And I say more experienced carefully. I don't say the older members. Because although clean time does speak for itself, clean time does not equal recovery. If you got a ton of clean time, that's great. I mean, you're doing something right. But I'm talking about the people who apply this stuff to their life, who live by the principles contained in the steps. And this more experienced member came up to the treatment center 3 times a week. And we worked the steps. And by the time I got out of treatment, I had a firm foundation in the steps. I'd worked steps 1 through 12. And I got out of treatment, and I started attending meetings in the city of Detroit proper, not the suburbs. And when I got clean in the city of Detroit, I was probably the youngest and possibly the whitest member clean in the city of Detroit at the time. And I had a real tough time identifying. I mean, there's these guys coming in talking about erectile dysfunction and Viagra, and I'm thinking, man, I'm 19 years old. If I even get a whiff of a woman, I get a hard on. I'm walking around the meeting with my books in front of my crotch, because if I see a girl in a short skirt, I get a hard on. And so I'm having a problem identifying. I can't identify with them, and they can't identify with me. And I was considering using, right? Because here I am. I know I'm supposed to be here, right? I know I'm supposed to be here. I know I belong here, but yet I still feel like I'm apart from. I still don't feel a part of. And my sponsor told me, he said, Sean, what I need you to do is I need you to hold on, and I need you to keep going to meetings. And when another young person comes in, I need you to grab onto them and show them that it works. And then when another young person comes in, I need you to grab onto them and show them that it works. And then another one will come in, and you grab onto them and show them that it works. And that's exactly what happened. Within about 9 months, we had a crew. We had like 25 people. And we were on fire for recovery. We went to meetings all over the state. We went to conventions all over the country. The older members used to hate to see us coming. Because they knew if we were coming, some shit was going to get started. Because we had a tradition study. We worked the steps. I mean, we were living this shit. And they used to hate to see us coming because I'd be at a meeting and the older member would say something like, self-centeredness is the core of our disease. And I'd open my book, I'd say, my book says self-obsession is the core of the disease. I don't know what your book says. Or we had a rash of people dying in NA for a while, and it seemed like every time someone would die, someone would say, well, some of us have to die in order for some of us to live. And then I open my book and I say, my book says that no addict seeking recovery need die.
Yeah.
No addict. Not some addicts, a lot of addicts, many addicts, no addict seeking recovery need die. And so we had this crew, right? And we were going everywhere and we were on fire for recovery. And I'm sad to say that most of them aren't here anymore. If you get close to people in Narcotics Anonymous, chances are you're going to lose some people in your life. I don't think we fully understand the meaning of grace until someone that's close to us goes back out and doesn't make it back in. And I had all these friends, and most of them are using, or about half of them are dead, and the rest of them are using, but there's 4 of us that are still clean. One of them made the switch to the other fellowship, and he's doing great. My closest male friend out of the group, when he had come into NA, he had just gotten out of prison. And before he went to prison, he had a scholarship to a really prestigious art school in Detroit. And he blew it because he went to prison. And when he got out, he had kept sharing about how he had these dreams of being a famous artist and how he wanted to be an artist. And we encouraged him. And we said, if this is your dream, do it. You can do it. And so he enrolled in college and he got his bachelor's degree. And then he applied to the Masters of Fine Arts program at Yale University. That's Ivy League, people. Out of the 10,000 people that apply every year, only a handful get in. And he got in. They let an addict into Yale. That's the message of hope. We're talking about lost dreams awaken, new possibilities arise. When the drugs go and the addicts work the program, marvelous things happen. Dreams do come true in recovery. And the other friend, my closest female friend, she still lives in Detroit. She's graduating with her master's degree in a couple weeks from Wayne State University in social work. And you know who she asked to go help her celebration? She didn't ask her parents. She didn't ask her coworkers. She asked me. She asked me to be there and help her in her graduation. We're talking about the guy that no one wanted anything to do with. We're talking about the guy who got kicked out of the dope house with drugs and money.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't want to see me coming because they knew if I was there, that some shit was going to get broken, all the dope was going to get used up, and the cops were probably going to get called.
Oh, man.
No one wanted to hear what I had to say. No one wanted to hear what I had to say. And here I am, April 26, 2008, in Key West, Florida, carrying the message of hope and the promise of freedom to the still suffering addict. Somewhere along the way, I met a young lady and we got married. Oh, I'm going to talk about it. You can count on that. But somewhere along the way, I also got complacent, right? I think everyone at some point in their recovery gets complacent. At least everybody I know at some point in their recovery has gotten complacent. You know, my life got good. You know, I formed an analogy that it's similar to what happened in Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, right? I mean, they knew there was a problem with the levees. There were studies done that showed that there was a problem with the levees and that if something big happened, they wouldn't be able to sustain it. But rather than undergo the investment of updating the levees, the billions of dollars it would cost, they decided to let it ride. Well, similar thing happened with me. I was happy. I was in love. I was married. I had relative success on my job. You know, I was relatively well-known in Narcotics Anonymous. And all I was doing was service work. I thought that if you saw me and you thought I was doing okay, that's all that counted. And so I had these high-profile service positions, on the convention and member of the board of directors of the regional service office and all these high-profile service positions. And I thought that if you saw that I was okay, that I was okay. As long as I was visible to the people in Narcotics Anonymous, I was okay. But you see, I wasn't okay. I was dying on the inside. And at some point, I lost the ability to share honestly. And I started sharing only the theory of recovery. And don't get me wrong, the theory of recovery is great, but at some point, you got to get honest. If you want to recover, at some point, you got to get honest. And I lost the ability to share honestly because I was worried about what people would think. I lost the ability to get honest about the troubles I was having in my relationship, and the troubles I was having at work, and the troubles I was having with my sponsor. And I was in a mode of complacency. And then the storm hit. And when the storm hit in New Orleans, we all know what happened. When the storm hit for me, my wife left. She had an affair. She'll be 33 in June. She had an affair with an 18-year-old boy. And I was devastated. But I knew one thing, right? That if I was going to get through this, I was going to have a recommitment to the basics of the program. I knew that. I'd been coming around long enough and seen enough people go out when tough times happen and enough people stay around when tough times happen that I knew if I wanted to stay clean, I had to have a recommitment to the basics of the program. So I picked up my meeting attendance. I got actively involved in sponsorship again. I dropped a couple of my high-profile service positions. And I got actively involved in the process of recovery again. And that was the blessing that came out of my wife leaving, was that I'm as on fire for recovery today as I was when I first got here.
Yeah.
Sometimes tragedies can be blessings in disguise. When I thought my life was over, a new chapter had just begun. And so she led me on for a while, right? She'd come back every couple weeks and want to be with me, and then she'd go back a couple days later with her boyfriend. And shortly before the holidays of 2006, she said she wanted to come home for good. And so she wanted to get a therapist and work out our problems. I made an appointment for a therapist. She came home, and we were going to do this, right? We were going to make this work because I just want to make it work. Everything I've ever tried in my life, I failed at. I want to make this work. So she came home. A couple days before the holidays, her and I had a tradition that we would wrap presents and drink hot chocolate and watch all the Christmas specials, and I asked her if she wanted to do it, and she said she wasn't feeling well. So the nice guy that I am, I make her some soup, get her a pint of her favorite ice cream, and I take it over to her house. And who answers the door? The boyfriend. I was devastated. And you see, when things happen in my recovery, the disease of addiction goes in search of any situation that the feelings were similar, and it pulls it right to the surface and makes me re-experience those situations all over again. And the thing that it brought to mind was Tiffany. And I was in obsession mode. All I could think about, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't go to work. All I could think about was this guy fucking my wife. It played like a constant loop in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see it. And I was in obsession mode, and the only thing that I knew that relieved the obsession the last time, I knew I had to murder him. I don't know why people laugh at that. I don't think that's funny. Every time I share that, people laugh about it. And if you would have laughed at me when I was going through this, man, this shit was not funny when I was going through it. I can laugh about it now. But everyone laughs when I say that. I was going to kill this kid. And people laugh. That's not funny. What's wrong with you, man? You guys are sick. So I'm going to kill this kid, right? I dress in all black. I would have painted my teeth black if I could have. I unscrewed the little light bulb in my car so the light wouldn't go off when I opened the door. I learned that in Narcotics Anonymous, by the way. I didn't know that shit before I came here. You all taught me that. I unscrewed the little light bulb in my car, I got my pistol, and I followed the guy home from work. And while I was following him home from work, thoughts of recovery would try penetrating. And it would say, well, Sean, call your sponsor. I say, fuck that, that's my wife. Say, Sean, go to a meeting. That's my wife. Sean, do an inventory. That's my wife. I'm going to get my wife. Got all the way to his house. And finally, the thoughts of recovery penetrated. And I decided that I couldn't go through the guilt of taking another man's life again. So I go home, still in obsession mode, still couldn't kick the obsession. And let me backtrack a little while. Right after she left, I started an inventory, right? I met a man when I had about 6 months clean, Lawrence A. from California. Some of you might know him as the Beeve. Great man. Him and I became close friends, and we would travel together, and I would go see him in Los Angeles, and he would come to Detroit and see me. And we became very close friends. And he had suggested that I do this inventory that he had done several times long ago before he died. And it's not an inventory about Sean, addict, 27 years old. It was an inventory about a little boy. That little boy who always felt like he was unloved, who always felt like he wasn't good enough, who always felt like he never measured up. And so I had started this inventory. And I go home still in obsession mode, and the only other thought I have is suicide. The only other thought I have is suicide. And I've been suicidal at times in my life before, but this time it was serious. This time I was going to do it. I couldn't deal with the obsession. I just couldn't. And so as I'm sitting on my bed in contemplation of suicide, I started thinking about some things, like who would be at my funeral and would they cry and, all I really want to know when I die, I'll have peace if I know this when I die, that the world was a little bit better of a place because I was here. And I think because of Narcotics Anonymous, it is. I really do.
Hey guys, want to talk to you about United Recovery Project. We're a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. We have 3 locations in Florida and 3 locations in California. Our facilities are state-of-the-art, luxury, and high-end. We do take most insurances. If you're struggling, I always tell people to go to a 12-step meeting, but some of us need an extra head start to give us a fighting chance. For those of you that do need this head start, that are detoxing, that do think you need to speak to a professional, please call 833-999-1877. We are working with most insurances. Even if you can't get into our treatment center, we will point you in the right direction. Please give us a call today. Once again, that phone number is 833-999-1877.
And so I was going to kill myself. And as I'm in contemplation of suicide, this thought comes and says, just pray. And when the thought came, this little boy inside jumped to the surface and said, don't pray. God doesn't love you. He doesn't answer your prayers. Don't you remember? Don't you remember what happened? God doesn't love you. And the thought came, just pray. And the little boy jumped up again and said, don't pray. God doesn't love you. It's a waste of time. Just go ahead and end it. Just pray. Finally, in a last-ditch effort, I prayed, because this was the end of the road. And I figured I'd give it one last shot. I sent up the most sincere prayer that I've ever prayed. I said, God, help me. God, help me. And as the 11th step says, for some prayers, asking for God's help, and meditation is listening for God's answer. I went into a moment of meditation because I had to know if there was an answer coming, because this was the end of the road. If I didn't get an answer, I was going to kill myself. And so I went into this moment of meditation, and people had always shared about having visions in their meditations and stuff like that, and I always thought they were full of shit. People would share about seeing stuff in their meditations, and I always was like, man, you're dreaming. You're asleep. You ain't meditating if you're seeing shit. But some visions came to me, right? And I had never experienced this before. My meditations were always just clearing the mind. I'd never experienced this before, and the first vision I had was of a little boy who was on his bed crying. And I think it was me. But this time, there was someone there with me. And he said, son, I couldn't make them stop fighting. That was beyond my power. But I could be here with you and cry with you and let you know that you weren't alone. And the next vision I saw, it was of me in that ditch. But there was something around me keeping me warm. And he said, son, you can't die now. You can't die now. And I came to from this meditation, and some other things were revealed to me that, God never abandoned me, that I abandoned God. And that God has never not answered one of my prayers. Just some of the times the answer is no. But I could be so caught up in self-centeredness and so caught up in what I want and what I think I need that I can't see the truth. I can't see what God really has in store for me. Like it talks about in the 11th step, the image of the kind of person we want to be is a fleeting glimpse of God's will for us. What that means is my highest aspirations for myself, my greatest dreams for myself, don't even touch what God is going to do with me if I stay clean. Don't even touch what God is going to do with me. You see, the thing is I'd been living for so long under this guise of the spiritual being, right? Because, my sponsor told me I had to get a God, and everyone kept sharing about this God thing, and so I started sharing about God, and I started reading the literature, and I would underline and highlight anything where it said spiritual or God, and I would quote it at meetings. So I was living under this guise of the spiritual being, and I was being asked to share all over the world about God and God's will for me. And I could convince the newcomer that God loves them and that they're here in Narcotics Anonymous for a reason so that they can touch somebody. But I didn't believe it myself. I thought I was unworthy of God's love. I thought there was no possible way that God could love me because I'd filled my spirit so much with shame and guilt that I couldn't feel the presence of God inside of me. The 11th step says meditation puts us in contact with the God within us. Not outside of us. You see, my problem was I was always looking for God outside of me. I always thought I needed some person, place, thing, or situation that would be all right. I was looking for a material solution to a spiritual problem. I need nothing. I need nothing to be that which I already am. I can be content with or without a job, with or without a partner. I don't need things to make me happy. But I thought I did. And so I was confused. And I started to really realize after this situation that God's love has been present the whole time, just waiting for me to accept it. And that the power that brought me to this program is still with me and will continue to guide me if I allow it. I'm going to share a story real quick. I like stories. I love stories. I've heard so many stories since I've been in Narcotics Anonymous. And it's like I hear them, right? And I tuck them in the back of my brain because I know they're supposed to mean something. But I don't have the experience yet to make them mean what they're supposed to mean to me. And then when I get the experience, it means a whole new thing to me. Like my sponsor used to say some shit to me that went way over my head when I was new. He would say things like, Sean, loneliness is just an invitation into God's kingdom. And I would say, yes, yeah, that sounds good, but I'm going to get laid. So, I heard this story when I had about 3 months clean. And it's about a poor sharecropping family somewhere in the South. And this is a story that God allowed me to live through. It's a story about a poor sharecropping family somewhere in the South. The family was so poor that they didn't own a mirror. So they knew what each other looked like, but they didn't know what themselves looked like because they never saw their reflection in a mirror. And one day the floods came, and the family helped the neighbor save his crop. So as a show of gratitude, the neighbor gave the family a present of a mirror. And the father, not being accustomed to getting presents, ran home and got the family together on the couch, and they opened the mirror. And he looked in the mirror, and for the first time, he saw how handsome he was. For the first time, he saw how good-looking he was. And then he passed the mirror to his wife, and she kind of did her hair a little bit and even blushed a little bit. And she, too, finally realized how beautiful she was. And then they passed it to their teenage daughter, and her head got a little bit big, as only a teenager's can. And she finally realized why when they went to town, all the boys went a little bit crazy because she was so beautiful. And then an air of sadness came over the family as they passed it to the teenage son, because when he was a child, he got kicked in the face by a cow, and not being able to afford doctors or surgeons, every year his face got a little more gnarled and a little more mangled. And he started to sob, and he said, "I'm so hideous. I'm a monster. How can you possibly love me? How can you possibly love me? You're all so beautiful, but I'm so hideous." And as only a good mother could do, she took him in her arms and she said, "I love you simply because you're mine." So if you're out there and you're feeling that there's no possible way that anyone could love you, or there's no possible way that God could love you, all the things you've done, He loves you simply because you're His. And so after my wife left, I got a little bit crazy, right? I mean, I was feeling so lonely and empty inside. I remember I was at a meeting with my sponsor after all this had happened, and it was a midnight meeting, and I was just sobbing in his car. I was just sobbing, and I was so upset, and I said, "Charles, man, what's it going to take for her? What's it going to take for her to realize what a great guy I am?" And he said, "Sean, what's it going to take for her? What's it going to take for you to realize what a great guy you are?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds good, but holding on is so hard, or letting go is so hard." And he said, "If you think letting go is hard, try holding on." And so I went buck wild, right? I mean, like, I was feeling so empty and lonely inside. I was in a full-blown relapse. I just didn't pick up the drugs. What I picked up was sex. And I started having sex with all kinds of people, all different ways and different places, and upside down, tied up, it didn't matter. I mean, it got really out of control. And I remember in March of 2007, I was looking in the mirror and I started thinking about who and what I had become, and I started to get disgusted with myself. Because that's never who I've been. I've always been someone who values a committed relationship. I've never been someone who just wants to, get a piece of ass every now and again, every day from a different woman. That's never been me. I've always been someone who values a committed relationship, and I started to get disgusted with myself. And I made a decision at that point that I wasn't going to live like that anymore. Because I couldn't keep living the way I was living and expect something good to come out of my life. There was a drastic change in the way I lived that needed to take place. So I decided I wasn't going to have random sex with random people anymore. And I met a young lady, the end of April in Dayton, Ohio. I was speaking. And when I met her, man, her representative, the person that I thought she was hell of a. Like, she had 5 years clean. She was doing it. She had her 2 kids. She was raising them on her own. Like, it looked like she had her shit together, right? So we started to see each other, and I started to go down there pretty much every weekend, and we started to talk about her possibly moving up to Detroit or me possibly moving down to Ohio, and we started to fall in love. I was playing Legos with her son one day on his birthday. I bought him this big Lego playset. I loved Legos when I was a kid. I don't know if anyone can identify, but if you gave me a set of Legos, I was all right. And so I bought this big Lego playset for him for his birthday. And we started to put it together, and he started telling me about his friend Jeff. So I started asking questions about his friend Jeff. I'm a curious guy. I want to know about his friends. I mean, I might be his stepdad one day. So then he starts saying, well, it's actually my mom's friend. Well, it's actually your other boyfriend. But I'm not supposed to talk about him around you because you'll get mad. I went from spiritual giant to spiritual retard like that. I was fucked up. But I couldn't show him that because I didn't want him to think that telling the truth was a bad thing, so I had to hold it all in. And so I'm still playing Legos with him, and the resentment's just growing, and I'm like, oh man, I can feel it getting bigger inside of me. Have you ever felt the resentment getting bigger inside of you? It was like I had a fucking tumor, right? And so she comes home, and I start grilling her about this dude, right? And she plays it off. Well, long story short, right? She's living a double life. This guy's coming up there during the weeks and living there during the weeks and then going home on the weekend when I come down. Above that, this guy's taking her to turn tricks. He's pimping her out. Above that, this guy's a grand sponsee of mine. I've been sponsoring the sponsor for like 6 years. So for your next retreat, If you want a topic, try my grand sponsees pimping out my girl. I don't know how many people will be able to identify, but I know I sure will. But after my wife left, just seemed like things just kept happening, and it's like I never got a breath of air. Just one thing right after another kept happening, and like life on life's terms really showed up. And no one told me about that when I got clean. No one told me about that. No one told me that my life was going to get really fucked up. No one told me that. See, I was under the impression when I first got clean that when the drugs went, everything would be okay, that I would be happy, joyous, and free all the time. But that's not what no one told me that. That's just what I thought, right? So a lot of things started happening, and I met a guy named John. He'd been coming around for a long time. He'd been coming around since like the early 80s in Detroit, NA, and he never managed to get 2 years clean. And I used to see him all the time at meetings, and I loved him. He was such a great guy. Anyone who saw him, he just put a smile on their face. He was that type of guy. Like, when you saw him, made everyone happy. But he couldn't stay clean. And one time he came to me, he said, Sean, how do you stay clean? I want to stay clean so bad. How do you stay clean? And I told him, it's easy, man. It's easy. We have never seen a person who lives the Narcotics Anonymous program relapse. That's what it says in Recovery and Relapse. That's an absolute. Never. Most of our books talk in non-absolutes. Many of us, most of us, some of us, our experience of a fellowship indicates. That's an absolute, and it's there for a reason. The founder of the other fellowship on his deathbed, in their literature it says something similar, but it says rarely. On his deathbed, they asked him if he could change one thing about his life, what would he change? He would change rarely to never. We have never seen a person who lives in the Narcotics Anonymous program relapse. If you go to a meeting every day, call your sponsor, work the steps, and do service work, you won't use. It's that simple. And if you don't want to use, do those things. If you don't do those things, you may want to use. I don't know. I'm not here to judge your desire. But I'm saying that's what my sponsor told me when I got clean. He told me, Sean, dive into this program as though your life depends on it, because it does. And I did. I dove in, because I knew my life depended on it. And so he asked me to sponsor him. He had about 6 months clean. I started sponsoring him. Him and I became very close friends. And you see, I'm not friends with all my sponsees. I'm just not. Some of them I don't even like, right? I mean, I guide them through the steps and traditions and how to apply the principles contained within them in their lives. And that's it with some of them. And some of them, they're fine with that. But I don't guarantee that I'm going to be your friend when you ask me to be your sponsor. I'm just not like that. I got a close-knit group of friends who I'm friends with, right? And so he asked me to be a sponsor, and we became really close friends, and we started traveling together. If you saw me between like 4 and 7 years clean, chances are that John was with me. I mean, we were road dogs. We went everywhere together. And shortly before his 2-year anniversary, he went to the doctor because he'd been feeling sick for a while. He had the flu for about a month, and he couldn't kick it, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed him with full-blown AIDS. And he came to my work after he got diagnosed, and I punched out, and we went back to my house, and we cried, and we talked, and we cried, and we talked, and we cried, and we talked. And he said, Sean, I don't want to hear anything about God, and I don't want to hear anything about dying, because I don't believe in God, and I'm not going to die. And you see, I've never had any experience like this with someone this close to me dying like this. I just never had it. All the people I know that died quickly. I never met anyone who died suffering like that. At least not since I've been clean, so I didn't have any experience. So I drew on the experience of a member that I heard share. When I first got clean, I heard this guy share. And I drew on his experience, and I told him, I said, John, we don't have to talk about God, and we don't have to talk about you dying, but what we do have to talk about is a little boy who needs to get his stuff ready so he can go home and see his father, because his father's calling him. And his health deteriorated very rapidly. And I would go over to his house every day after work, and I would rub his feet, and I would feed him, and I would change his diapers, and I would read him the literature. And a lot of people in Narcotics Anonymous, and I had a big resentment with Narcotics Anonymous with this for a while, because a lot of people wouldn't come see him. A A lot of his friends that he had wouldn't come see him. And I don't know if it was because they didn't want to see him dying or because lack of education of the nature of the disease. They thought they were going to get it from the door handle or something. Read a fucking book. Read a fucking book. I mean, this guy loved Narcotics Anonymous. He gave his heart and soul to Narcotics Anonymous when he was here. And only a few of us went to go see him, but on his because he had never gotten 2 years clean. He'd always relapsed between 18 months and 2 years. All he wanted to do was celebrate his 2-year anniversary. So we got him dressed and we got him all dressed up and put him in the wheelchair and took him to the meeting. And he stood up and celebrated his 2 years clean at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. About a week later, I went to his house as I did every day after work and started my routine. I would rub his feet, and then I would rub his back, and then I would feed him and change his diaper. And he asked his daughters and his wife to leave. And he said, Sean, he said, the little boy's ready and all packed up and ready to go home to see his father. And he asked me to pray with him, and I prayed with him. And shortly thereafter, he died, a couple hours later. And he died holding my hand. He died holding my hand. And he asked me one more thing. He asked, Sean, please look after my daughter. His daughter, Kirsten, was in the midst of her active addiction. She was 14, and it had gotten really, really bad. And he asked me to watch her after this August. She will celebrate 2 years clean in Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm not talking about just 2 years clean. She's in recovery. She's got a sponsor. She works the steps. She does service work, and she sponsors ladies.
All right.
That's the power of the example of Narcotics Anonymous. This is a program of attraction, not promotion. The message is meaningless unless I live it. As I live it, my lives and actions give it more meaning than my words and literature ever could. Than our words and literature ever could. I'm just so grateful to Narcotics Anonymous. I just love Narcotics Anonymous so much. And I travel around a lot. I get around a lot. I go to a lot of conventions. And the thing that makes this thing so special is the people. The thing that makes this thing so special is the people in Narcotics Anonymous. You people. It talks about in the 12th tradition in Works on Why that we pray that Narcotics Anonymous never become a gray and faceless collection of people. We enjoy the color, the compassion, the rough and tumble attitude.
Yes.
I mean, Narcotics Anonymous, we have achieved perfection. We have achieved what society's been trying to achieve for thousands of years. Total integration. I don't care what you used, who you used with, who your connections were, what you've done in the past, how much or how little. I don't care about what color you are, how old you are, your sexual identity. All I care about is what you want to do about your problem and how I can help. Because I faced your dilemma and I found a way out. How much time do I get? 5 minutes. While I was out of control, I met a young lady and I impregnated her. Hey man, it happens, right? I made a mistake, That's what happens when you have unprotected sex. Babies are made. See, they taught me that shit in school. I must not have been paying attention. And I should have learned from my sponsor, because he's got 4 kids with 4 different women, so I should have learned from him, but I didn't. But she didn't tell me she was pregnant until she was 8.5 months pregnant. And this was long. This was September of this past year, and I had already broken up with the girl from Ohio, and she told me that she was pregnant. I remember praying to God shortly before she told me that, thank you, God, that you got me through that craziness that I was going through without catching something, without getting a girl pregnant. I was so grateful. And then 2 weeks later, she called and told me she was pregnant. God's got an ironic sense of humor, right? Doesn't he? I pray for something and I get it, but I didn't get it the way I wanted. I remember when I was married, it had been so bad for so long that I used to pray that it would end, that our relationship would end, right? I remember I used to fantasize on my way to work about her dying. Can anyone relate with that? Fantasizing about your spouse? Because here's the thing, is I wanted it to end, right? But I didn't want to have to be the bad guy. I wanted to come out smelling okay, so if she died in a car accident, I could play the grieving husband and like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, and maybe even get some grief pussy from it and shit like that, I mean, I'd be all right. Fuck, man.
Get on it.
This is my thought process, right? But when she left, right, I remember praying, But I'd say to God, God, I don't want this to happen, but just let me fantasize for it for a minute. Let me fantasize about it for a minute. But I don't want it to happen. So when she left me, right, and she had an affair with this other dude, that's not how I wanted it to happen, right? That was a killer hit to my pride. That's not how I wanted it to happen. But it happened that way. And I prayed for it. I got what I wanted. It's not the way I wanted it. So she told me she was pregnant. She was 8.5 months pregnant when she told me she was pregnant. And I told her, I was like, we weren't in love. We weren't even close to being in love. As a matter of fact, I really couldn't even stand her. We had one thing in common, and that was awesome sex. That was the only thing we had in common. We got together every now and again, and we did our thing, and then we parted ways. And I told her, I was like, whatever we decide, I'll be here to support you. I'm a stand-up guy. I ain't going to bail out on my responsibilities. 2 weeks after she had him, I took him for the weekend. Long weekend, Thursday through Monday. And I called her Wednesday through Saturday. I had him. And I called her on Saturday night and said, I'm going to bring him home now. And she said, don't bring him home. And she said, I don't want it. I don't want it. It went from a him to an it. And so here I am, right? I don't have anything for this child. I don't have anything for it. And I work full time. I go to school full time. And now I'm a single daddy, right? I don't have anything for him. I got like a couple pairs of clothes, like a half a pack of diapers, one bottle. Like, I don't have shit for this kid. And I go to my home group the next day, and I share about the predicament I'm in. And this young lady at my home group who's a close friend of mine who knows people all over the country sent out a mass email and like started calling people and telling people that, Sean needs your help. He's got this child. He doesn't have anything for him. He needs your help. And like a lot of people know me. I've gotten around. I know people all over the country. And the next 5 days, my phone rang off the hook. My doorbell rang off the hook. I mean, the FedEx drivers came to my house like 50 times. I have so much stuff for him now. So much. I don't need clothes for him for years. I got formula piled up to the ceiling. I got enough diapers. Like, people, I just take diapers to meetings and give them to people because I got so many fucking diapers. Narcotics Anonymous showed up, right? I would get little letters in the mail saying, I heard you share 3 years ago, and here, I want you to have this. You helped me. We never know where the help is going to come from. I'm a firm believer that everything that has happened in my life has happened for a reason and has built me up to exactly where I am right now. I'm a firm believer in that. And the most precious thing I got, right? The most precious thing I got was when I was in Complacency, when I was still running on image time, I shared in Kansas City. And I was supposed to do a main meeting, and I got there and they told me, well, some things happened and now you're going to be doing this workshop. And I'm like, workshop? Don't you know who I think I am? Fucking workshop? I flew here from Detroit to Kansas City to do a fucking workshop? What, are you kidding me? I was upset, and had my grand sponsor not been with me, I probably would have got on the plane and turned around. But he was with me, and he's like, Sean, he's like, who are you to say what God has in store for you? Who are you to say what you're supposed to be here to do? So I did the workshop, and it was dealing with grief, and I shared a lot about my experience with grief, because I've lost a lot of people since I've been clean. A lot of close friends. I found my little brother dead from suicide in his bathtub. I've dealt with a lot of grief in Narcotics Anonymous since I've been here. It seems like death kind of follows me. So if you want to live, just stay the fuck away from me, because chances are if you start hanging out with me, you're going to die pretty soon. Sorry, Rena. So I get this letter in the mail, right? From a young lady from Kansas City. And I'm going to paraphrase because it was like 3 pages long, but it said something like this. I met you in Kansas City 3 years ago. And you did a workshop dealing with grief. And I bought the tape. And a few months later, my infant daughter died. And I was devastated. I was going to use or kill myself, and I was devastated. But I found your tape. And I listened to it over and over and over and over and over again. And it got me through that tough time. And I don't have much. But what I do have is this quilt that my grandmother knitted for my infant daughter. And she loved this quilt. And I want you to have it. I want you to have it. Can't tell me that the finest people in the world aren't in Narcotics Anonymous.
Yeah!
It's the fellowship of love and compassion. A simple loving hug can make all the difference in an addict to the world when he's struggling. All the difference in the world to an addict when he's struggling. All it takes is a hug sometimes. And you go places, and some places they don't hug in Narcotics Anonymous. And I don't know why that is, but when I go there, I always share that the reason we hug is because due to the nature of the disease of addiction, I might never see you again. It's my responsibility and obligation to extend love to you. I love Narcotics Anonymous, and I'm passionate about Narcotics Anonymous. I'm so grateful to God and the program for taking me as far as it's taken me and giving me all that I have. But if I died today, I would die a happy man. I really, really would. I would die with peace and serenity. I have a level of peace and serenity today that I thought never possible. And I love all you. And thank you for showing us a good time here in Key West. I had a blast. I really, really did. I mean, this is truly recovery in paradise. I'm going to get home and I'm going to start researching on the internet jobs in Key West. And apartments in Key West. So if y'all see me down here pretty soon, you'll know why. I wish I didn't have to. But this program is amazing. And if you're here and you're clean and you're having a difficult time, talk to somebody. Get honest about what you're going through. Because my sponsor told me when I got clean that if you don't tell us where you are, how are we supposed to come get you? Honesty is the antidote to our diseased thinking. Secure in the love of the fellowship, I can finally look another human being in the eye and be grateful for who I am. Grateful for who I am. Not what I offer you, not what I look like, not how much money is in my bank, not what kind of car I drive, not how big my house is. Be grateful for who I am. Thank you for letting me share.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. This show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.